Next up, I would like to introduce Alex Villamil. Alex is the Human Rights Chair for an organization called Action Together Connecticut, and I think he's got a great tale to tell us. Here's a young man who has actually had boots on the ground throughout the country, doing good things. So, Alex?
I'd like to thank the organizers for putting this together. This is a wonderful event. To have 800 of these and going nationwide is amazing. Also like to thank Bethel for hosting. My name is Alex Villamil. I'm here to represent Newtown Forward and Action Together Connecticut. Most importantly, I'm here to represent all the people at the border who are currently incarcerated under the most shocking circumstances imaginable. As a son of first-generation immigrants, fortunate enough to have been born here in Connecticut, in between trips to and from Columbia, a proud nutmegger, as a matter of fact, I've experienced firsthand what sacrifices are made when an immigrant makes that fateful decision to leave their country, their family, their friends, and all that is familiar to them for the sake of providing a safe and stable future for their children. We left Columbia back in the 70s at a time when there was great political upheaval. Demonstrations in the streets, student rallies that often broke into rock-throwing melees against armored police and military. Martial law was declared, curfews were imposed, shots rang out in the distance in the middle of the night, and my mother did not feel that that was a safe environment for us to grow up in. So with very little money, 2 sons in tow, hardly any English to communicate with, and a dream for a better life, we came back to the United States. I grew up with other families like ours. Some had papers, some did not. We were all just people, making the most of every opportunity. Parents always working, children educating themselves, all slowly but steadily climbing towards achieving the American dream. There was hardly any mention of papers or legal status back then. No one truly cared. People, that is, each other, was what we cared about. Little by little, the questions of legal status were settled by our friends as they slowly got their green cards, social security numbers, or working papers, and we celebrated each time. There was no persecution, no threats, no dehumanization of individuals. Within my immigrant community, there was a sense that all we had to do was work hard, pay our taxes, keep within the law, and the law in turn, within its infinite justice and wisdom, would see that we were contributing members of society, that we loved and were grateful to this country for what it had given us, and that little by little, those who were undocumented would eventually become documented. That's the America I grew up in. My community was a microcosm of the country's mentality at the time, a melting pot of immigrants who celebrated their differences by honoring their roots while proudly calling themselves Americans. Fast forward 30 years or so later, I can hardly recognize the country I grew up in. We find ourselves in a time where immigrants are being scapegoated and blamed for every evil that occurs in this country. They are no longer considered a necessary ingredient to our melting pot. All have been generally categorized by the current administrations as rapists, killers, gang members, drug traffickers, thieves, and vagabonds. A careful and well thought out process of dehumanization orchestrated by the Trump administration is evident. The message being that immigrants are here to do us harm, either by taking jobs away or gaming the system, or somehow apparently doing both. For over 2 years, I've been working with the immigrant families whose lives have been turned upside down. I've met people who have peacefully lived in the United States for 20 to 25 years. They have worked, paid their taxes, and raised families. Most of them for years have tried to legalize their status, but for one reason or another, and through no actual fault of their own, have been unable to do so. When it was required, they dutifully complied and registered with ICE. This made them easy prey when the Trump administration decided that it was not just only going to target gang members or drug traffickers, but families as well. Who when they go for a monthly check-in with ICE, are suddenly given 1 month to leave the country. When this occurs, I've seen spouses separated and parents separated from their children. Ankle monitors placed on these individuals while they are not in custody, adding further humiliation to the ordeal. I witnessed the sudden anguish and despair that arises from the sudden uncertainty. This anguish is not limited to the adults, but it visibly trickles down to the children who are mercilessly exposed to the terror of possibly losing a parent to deportation. Last summer, Zero Tolerance took our attention to the Mexican border. Over 2,700 kids that we know of were separated from their children, from their parents. The outcry led to the official revocation of this policy and the reunification of the majority of those kids with their families. Tragically, not all were reunited. 117 are out there. They're considered lost by DHS. DHS simply shrugged their shoulders and moved on. All this is bad enough, but a little over a month ago, I got the shock of a lifetime. I read this post that talked about incarcerated immigrants at the border being kept outside in cages with no shelter from the elements in 100+ degree heat, in what one journalist aptly termed dog pens. It seemed so outlandish that I immediately considered it to be fake news and questioned the sources and motives. Within a few days, it was clear that the source was legitimate, and the motive was to sound the alarm. Under current conditions, results of the present administration's policies and the actions of the agents, we have seen reports of atrocities occurring at the border. Atrocities that no American, regardless of ethnicity, race, political affiliation, or stance on immigration would find tolerable. This is a human issue that transcends any of these things. In the land of the free and the home of the brave, we do not trample on the rights of those in need of shelter. Yet somehow, someway, we find ourselves doing just that. And this has got to stop. We have heard or read about horrors such as a tiny premature baby and its 17-year-old mother doubled over in pain. Doubled over in pain from recent emergency C-section that were ignored at temporary migrant shelters for 7 days, when they should have been at a medical facility. A flu outbreak in May led to the death of one minor and closed a processing facility for days. A measles outbreak where over 50 refugees have been quarantined. In early June, 3 immigrants in ICE CPB custody died in 3 days. 6 children have died since late last September after being detained by the Border Patrol, including 3 in the last month. As an Inspector General report last month found severe overcrowding inside an El Paso processing center with 76 migrants packed into a tiny cell designed for a maximum of 12 people. Investigators saw immigrants standing on top of toilets to make room and find space to breathe because the cell was so cramped. I have to go a little off speech. The inhumanity is just overwhelming. I feel it not only as an immigrant, but as a human being. From one human being to another. Recently, 37 children, as young as 5 years old, were left locked in a van under the hot sun for up to 39 hours. Most recently, a young family who traveled over 1,000 miles for 2 months fell victim to the mismanagement of an unfeeling administration. The young father and his 2-year-old daughter drowned in the waters of the Rio Grande. When out of desperation, after being denied entry into our country through Trump's immigration policy of metering, which forces migrants to put their names on a waiting list and wait in Mexico just to have an opportunity to come back and apply for asylum. That's got to be a human rights violation right there somewhere. The backlog being months for that waiting list, rather than waiting for months in an extremely dangerous town, the young parents, out of sheer desperation, tried to cross the river and paid a high price. What country are we living in? Do we stand on the sidelines and let this continue to happen? Are we not complicit by remaining spectators in this horrible tragedy? In fighting for these people, we fight for the soul of our country. Who are we? We can choose to build walls, or we can choose to build bridges. In my opinion, America's greatest asset has been its people, derived from countries far and wide. Our greatness does not only come from investing on brick and mortar, but most importantly, it comes from hopes and dreams. Right now, we need leadership. We need Congress to stand for what is right and protect these people. Action Together is taking several initiatives. We recognize, for instance, that companies are complicit in enabling migrant concentration camps. Wayfair employees stage walkouts because they're supplying a facility that will detain 3,000 migrant children. Private prison companies, CoreCivic and GEO Group, manage concentration camps across the U.S. Amazon provides facial recognition software to ICE. You might be profiting off the detention of children in your 401k. Luckily, your personal investments, including your 401k, also gives you power to help end migrant abuse. That's because companies have to listen to their shareholders like you. You're their boss. Action Together Connecticut is working with a website called YouStake.org. It runs online petitions from real shareholders. It verifies your investments so that companies have to respond to your demands. They're partnering with migrant advocacy groups to deliver petitions directly to company management. So we can cut the legs off these companies that are supporting these concentration camps just by taking the financial support away from them. There will be a flyer being circulated on this so you can get more information. And more postings will come from Action Together on this. This strategy works, by the way. Shareholders and activists pressured JP Morgan and Bank of America to stop giving loans to private prisons that run these migrant camps. Now you can make sure your retirement account is going to work to stop migrant abuse instead of profit from it. Also, legislators with supportive citizens who are willing to do the work of helping to pass bills turn into law can create meaningful and necessary change. This week, through countless phone calls, Action Together Connecticut strongly urged Representative Rosa DeLauro to craft legislation modeled after the oversight granted U.S. childhood centers to be applied to the detention centers using asylum seekers in horrific conditions. Like First Selectman Knickerbocker mentioned, these people would be in jail for treating children like this. Oversight can not only provide protections for innocent suffering men, women, and children, but it can be the first step in shutting down detention centers. Please call Rosa DeLauro and ask her to craft legislation ensuring oversight for detention centers modeled after the oversight process granted to early childhood centers. Please go to Action Together Connecticut's private group page if you would like more information on this action. Finally, to support immigrants facing deportation here in Connecticut, please support the work of Connecticut Bail Fund by donating to this important organization. Please go to Connecticut Bail Fund or simply Google Connecticut Bail Fund. Now, as a personal appeal, I am looking to all of you not to let this wonderful gathering be the end of all your efforts. This is an amazing event, but great things don't always happen in the amazing. Oftentimes, they occur in the mundane. Mundane things such as daily phone calls to representatives, or groups, or letters to the editor. If we all engage and commit in a single-minded effort, we can force change. I am asking you to internalize what I've spoken about. Don't let it go. This is important. Make it a part of your day and say to yourself, what can I do today towards solving this problem? Think outside the box or reach out to grassroots groups leadership for guidance. Thank you so much for being here.